Love is like the dew that accumulates on leaves on a cold winter morning in the middle of summer. Love is like the patterns you see on a broken kaleidoscope, diffracted and mesmerizing. Think that kind of stuff is annoying? You're probably gonna like this video. In today's video, we're going to be looking at love through a scientific perspective and through a philosophical perspective, and we're going to try to be merging the evidence and the logic to create a super understanding. Now, some people are going to argue that true love is entirely subjective. Some people are going to argue it's entirely objective. And I think it's very obvious the truth is that it's partly objective and partly subjective. I think there obviously is things we can do to improve the probability of achieving deeper and more meaningful love. For example, if you spend 1 microsecond a year with your partner versus an adequate amount of time to interact, I think you're going to do a lot better with an adequate amount of time. How can you love someone if you literally never interact with them? Here's another example, all right? Many people, in fact, the overwhelming majority of people tell me they are not on a quest for true love, right? I think if you start with someone who doesn't value love and is not on that quest, then your odds of achieving it are way lower. So there's obviously some objective things that are going to improve your odds of success. Alright, so first I'd like to look at this scientifically, because according to modern science, there's 6 qualities that determine close relationships and intimacy. So, let's go through these. These are interdependence, these are passion, rewards, self-disclosure, similarities, and commitment. I totally had that memorized. So I think if you ask the average person what makes a successful relationship, their list of qualities would be inferior to the science list. Maybe I'm wrong, I've never done that. But my perception is if you ask the average person what makes a successful relationship, they'd probably say something like, being a provider, making lots of money, being very hot, being very sexy, it'd be stuff like that, right? It'd probably be a pretty crappy list. So let's look at all these things in depth, all right? So first, let's look at self-disclosure. What does that mean? It means basically revealing who you really are to the other person, getting close. Yes, that seems very logical. To have a close relationship, you should be close. I'm not going to disagree there. I'm pretty sure they're right, and I'm pretty sure the evidence would back that up. Number 2, similarities. So there's always the saying, opposites attract, birds of a feather flock together. Well, the first thing they say in the psychology textbook is they've proven that birds of a feather flock together. That's generally the case, and I think like a dominant person and a submissive person tend to get along better than the similar type, right? But I think in general they are definitely right. Okay, so for example, especially when it comes to deep things. So for example, if you're someone who is motivated very heavily by, say, compassion, that's a big thing for you, right? You're going to get along way better with someone who is compassionate than someone who's a cold-hearted dick. So I think that's absolutely right. Okay, that's a general thing, right? And I would add on to that, it's not like the superficial similarities that matter, okay? Like in the textbook, they're using examples like if both people like to go to a movie, they're going to get along better, okay? I don't think going to a movie is usually going to be a deep similarity. I'm saying things like if you have similar moral views, that's going to be a big thing, right? If you're motivated by similar emotions, that's going to be a big thing. If you have similar goals in life, if you have similar ways of reasoning, I think these are things that are going to really matter. Now, next is rewards. So what do they mean by rewards? This just means selfish benefit. So you should feel good in a relationship. If you enter this relationship, you should get some kind of emotional utility out of it. You should get some kind of happiness out of it, or it should be rewarding and fulfilling. You should feel good from doing it. right? I think that's generally right. All right. If both people just feel horrible together, a relationship will fail, and it's not even a matter of selfishness. Okay, because you would want your partner to feel good in a relationship too, right? You wouldn't be happy knowing that your partner is completely miserable being with you, right? So rewards, sure, we'll give that a pass. The next thing is interdependence. This one I think gets a big F. Interdependence is where you basically have to rely on the other person to manage your life. So the examples they give is like one person takes care of the kids this day while the other person washes the dishes. The one person takes care of the income while the other person does this or that, right? So they give these examples of interdependence, and I think interdependence is actually a hallmark of superficial relationships. I think a deep relationship, people shouldn't need to depend on each other. It's okay if they do, but they shouldn't need to, because this is a business-like relationship, right? People should desire each other rather than depend on each other. Okay, so let me give you some examples of why I think interdependence doesn't work at all, right? Would you feel more secure in a relationship knowing that the other person depends on you financially? Like they can't make money on their own, and they say they need you to financially, survive. You probably would not feel more secure. You'd probably feel less secure because you'd wonder if they're just using you for money, right? Especially when they say they are, right? If you rely on each other and you actually need each other, then you're going to stay together even if other more important qualities like you actually love each other aren't there. Next on the list is passion. I think that, yes, there has to be this emotional element to a relationship. Obviously, if people don't feel good in a relationship, then it's pointless. In which case I would also argue that passion is the same thing as rewards. I don't see any real difference between the two. But yeah, obviously, people need to feel good in various ways, right? And the last thing was commitment. Right, commitment. So I think that's obviously right as well, all right? So, right, if people aren't trying to meet their partner's needs, it's obviously going to fail. Now, of course, there's going to be people who say, the science is wrong, just ignore that, it's totally subjective. And I think that they're going to be wrong. And I can kind of prove it too, okay? Because I'm going to give the science list, right, the one we just went through, and now I'm going to give you a different list here. Right? So if everything's subjective, then the following list I should give you should be just as likely to form deep, close, and intimate relationships as the science-based list. So here's my list. It should be based entirely on physical attraction. Okay, so if you meet someone who is totally loving and intimate and they're 80% attractive, and then you meet someone who's 81% attractive and completely cold and shallow, take the 81%. Absolutely. And at any given moment, if you find an 82%, trade up, right? That's how you should do it. Okay, which of those two lists do you honestly think is more probable to create a loving, intimate relationship? I'm going to go with the science list. And I think anyone who's being, remotely serious and honest about this is going to probably lean towards the science list. They might say that this other type of list that produces longer relationships, right? That produces, more stable relationships, sure, but it doesn't produce more intimate relationships. No way. Let's look at the flaws of the science list and let's make it better. I think that list is maybe a good starting point for thinking about the subject, but you can go a lot further and do a lot better. So, let me give you an example. Let's take respect. Okay. I don't think you can have any kind of serious loving relationship if the people don't respect each other in a fundamental sense. So what do I mean by that, right? Well, there are certain things that don't matter, all right? So for example, I'm not very good at buying clothes, all right? My taste in fashion, I would say, is fairly poor because I've never really tried to get good at it and I don't really pay much attention. I'm just like, okay, this thing's cheap, let's get that, right? If you don't respect my clothes buying ability, I probably wouldn't be very offended, right? It's not something very important to me. If someone's like, hey, you could buy a much nicer shirt than this t-shirt for the same price, I'd be like, you're probably right, all right? But when it comes to things that actually are important to a person, those absolutely must be respected, right? So for example, if your big thing is art and your whole life is devoted to art and the other person does not respect your ability to produce art or whatever, right? I think that relationship will fail. If you do not respect someone's morals and ethics, I think that the relationship is going to fail. If you do not respect a person's deepest feelings, I think that relationship is going to fail. Respect is very important, and I would add that to the list. Now, I'll give you another example of something I think that's very important that's on the list. Growth and progress, right? So you can meet someone and you can have some level of intimacy, right? And then it just stays there, right? Well, that's not going to be as good, anywhere close to as good or as close as people who are both willing to continually grow and progress their relationship. They say we've achieved, X level of passion. Well, can we do X plus 1, right? We've achieved, X level of self-disclosure. Can we achieve X plus 1? We've achieved X level of respect. Can we increase that respect? Can we find ways of increasing that? The desire to grow and progress. That is a big part of relationships. Okay, what about understanding? I would say understanding is critically important. Now, that is not on the list. So for example, you have self-disclosure. You're going to reveal yourself to someone else, but just because you reveal yourself, right, it doesn't mean the other person actually understands you, right? Sometimes people have what I call illusions of empathy. This is where they feel all connected to someone and they feel like, they know how this other person is like, but in reality, they don't. And I always encourage you, if you're in a relationship, to play what I call the understanding game. This is where you ask fundamental questions about yourself and see if the other person can answer them correctly, right? And don't worry if you're not doing too good, because remember, growth and progress is part of relationships, right? So if you're not doing good, you grow and you progress, and you'll see how your understanding gets better and better over time, and that's very motivating, right? Now, in terms of relationships, these are absolutely, these are big fundamental things, right? But there's also a lot of small things that are superficial sounding on the surface, but actually do have a significant role in deep relationships. And I'll give you one example. One is time, okay? So let's say I have the choice of starting an intimate relationship with someone my age or someone who's 30 years older or 30 years younger than me, right? Well, I probably wouldn't want to date a 1-year-old or a 60-year-old, but some people would say you're shallow for not considering those options. I don't think it's actually shallow. I think it's actually deeper, and I have dated a 60-year-old. Just for reference, I actually did do that. I think if you have 30 years to spend with each other and then one of the partner's dead, right, or whatever, versus the maximum amount of time possible to spend with each other, then it makes much more sense to have a longer duration of time to share on Earth, right? So if you're the similar ages, that's good. And if the woman's a little older than you, that's even better, because women live on average around 5 years longer than men. So for me, it's like, yeah, if you're 36, watch out, I'm after you, right? All right, here's one I think that matters. Sexual orientation. And I hate to give homophobic arguments, but it actually is more rational to be bisexual if it's a choice, which it isn't for a lot of people. Probably 80% of people don't have much choice over their sexual orientation, right? But if you're one of the people who is totally malleable or even semi-malleable, it makes sense to try to gear your sexual orientation towards bisexuality, right? Because you just simply have the highest probability of not rejecting someone you're deeply intimate with, right? Another example I give is polyamory versus monogamy, all right? So polyamory is fine. I mean, there's what you call moral polyamory and immoral polyamory. So I had a feminist girl come to my meetup, my philosophy meetup, and she kind of gave me an introduction to moral polyamory, and I agree with her. I think she's absolutely right. If you do polyamory in the way that she's talking about, it's going to work fine. And for those of you who don't know, polyamory means having multiple sex partners, and monogamy means just one, right? So her way of doing it, it's all very informed, it's all very consenting, and it's all very fair, right? I would say though, if you're on a quest for the deepest love, monogamy is preferable, okay? Because if you just think about it logically, right? Imagine you're deeply in love with 100 people. First of all, I wouldn't even buy that that's possible, because it's really almost impossible to get to know 100 people on a extremely intimate level, right? But just think of it in terms of like commitment. Like, can you realistically, spend the same amount of time with 100 people as you could with one, right? And if you just follow it, through to the logical extension, imagine being in a relationship with 1 million people. Obviously, that could never work realistically. Your emotional energy, the amount of time you're actually thinking about each of those people is like less than a second a day, right? So the less people you're in a relationship with, the more energy you can devote into that one person. Striving for quality over quantity. I think that's another thing you can do to improve your odds of finding true love. I don't buy the polyamory argument. Alright, so if you like this video, share it, subscribe, give it a thumbs up or whatever, and let me know your thoughts on the quest for the deepest love. Are you on a quest for the deepest love? If so, maybe join my Facebook group. I have it in the description. This is a group for people who are on this quest. And let me know your thoughts, because I'm 100% sure my list is incomplete. And I know it's incomplete because I can think of more things that are on the list. So I'm sure you can too.